Welcome to episode 8, and the section we're reading for this coming week is all of chapter 9 through to chapter 10 verse 24. Now, an important question that the Gospels ask us and then answer is, who is Jesus? Now, we've discussed this a few times, but in this section things come to a head and Jesus himself asks, who do you say that I am? He's asking Peter, but that question is pointed at readers too, like us, and everything turns on this. Either he isn't who he says he is, and life goes on as before, or he is, and then everything changes. Now, the question of Jesus' identity is being asked throughout the Gospel of Luke. John was asking about it last week, and ironically, in chapter 9, verses 7 to 9, Herod is asking it too. Now, just to note, this isn't the same Herod in the Christmas story. Herod isn't a name, but the title of what were essentially the puppet kings installed by the Romans. So this is one of several Herods, but given that he's just executed John the Baptist in a moment of drunken stupidity, you can tell the apples aren't really falling very far from the tree. He's curious about Jesus, and he's heard rumours that John the Baptist might have been raised from the dead, and that's who this is, or maybe it's the return of the great prophet Elijah from the Old Testament, and, well, who is it? Then in chapter 9, verses 10 through to 17, we read about the feeding of the 5,000, perhaps the most famous miracle of all. But this is also about identity. Now, the other Gospels supply the detail that this event takes place outside of town in a deserted area. A deserted place, food from heaven, to someone who knew their Old Testament. That sounds a lot like Moses and the manna in the wilderness. Now, interestingly, as Moses' life on earth drew to a close, he gave a prophecy. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. But after Moses died, it goes on to say, since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. So a prophet, at least as significant as Moses, who knows God face to face, who God says must be listened to, is still on the way. Now, hold on to that thought for a moment. So all of this gives context to the discussion Jesus has with the disciples. Here, Jesus asks the big question, who do you say that I am? And Peter replies, God's Messiah, the anointed king. Which is right, but even Peter hadn't yet grasped the full dimensions of this. C.S. Lewis famously said that someone who claims what Jesus claimed is either bad, unhinged, or exactly who he said he was. But a great moral teacher, even one from heaven, Jesus didn't leave us with that option, and Peter is now going to discover this. Verses 28 to 36 describe what is generally known as the Transfiguration. Jesus goes up a mountain with 3 disciples and is transfigured. He's still the fully human Jesus, but in some way, something of his divine nature shines through. As if that's not enough, the long-gone Old Testament figures of Elijah and Moses appear with him, which, by the way, demonstrates he isn't one of them, come back. And if that's not enough, a cloud descends and God the Father says, "This is my Son, listen to him." A mountain, a cloud, divine glory, Moses and Elijah in attendance, and God telling us to listen to Jesus. The message is, this is the Son of God, the prophet that Moses foreshadowed, the one who truly knows God face to face. But there's also another theme running through this section that Jesus' followers will find even harder to grasp. Moses led the Exodus when Israel performed a sacrifice and were led to freedom out of Egypt. When Moses and Elijah talked with Jesus on the mountain, it says the subject of their conversation was his departure, and the Greek word there is exodus. So what kind of departure or exodus? Well, from here on we find Jesus referring to something again and again. In verses 21, 22 and 24, he predicts he will be killed, rise again. Moses' exodus was about sacrifice and freedom. Jesus' exodus is what we call Easter. He will sacrifice his life to save people from the consequence of sin and open the way to the kingdom of heaven. He will die in our place. This is absolutely key to understanding the Gospel of Luke. So, as it says in verse 51, Jesus sets his face to Jerusalem. All roads now lead to that appointment in Jerusalem, which we call Easter. So who is Jesus? Well, he is Lord and King, and he is sacrificial Saviour. Where does that leave us on our journey? Well, with the very same question, who do you think Jesus is? And an invitation to respond in understanding and faith. So here are some questions that I hope might help you understand this passage a little bit more. Question 1, who do you think Jesus is and why? Question 2, in chapter 10 and verse 21, Jesus was joyful that we don't have to be exceptional people to understand who he is and to respond. Do you find that a bit insulting or a bit encouraging? And question 3, verse 23 to 25, Jesus says there is a cost in following him. We have to place our lives at his disposal and it won't always be easy. What thoughts and feelings does that idea provoke? Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again next Friday.